On September 17, 1995, about 12 miles east of Johannesburg, a police reservist took the day off to hunt rabbits. He walked into one of the open fields known as the veld. He noticed a smell first, decomposition. He followed it and saw women's bodies laid out across the ground. 10 in total, not all the same. Some were fresh, some were dehydrated, some were skeletal. When police arrived, they didn't treat it as a single crime scene. They treated it as confirmation. For more than a year, women had been disappearing around Johannesburg and Pretoria. Bodies had been turning up one by one. But this field changed everything. It showed investigators that they were hunting a serial killer. And this was not the only killing field. As the investigation widened, police identified multiple dump sites, nearly 30 bodies in total, scattered across open land from Johannesburg to Pretoria. Every victim was a black woman between 19 and 43. Every one of them had been strangled with her own clothing. Officers had DNA, they had tips, they had leads, but they still had no suspect. The murders continued. Fear spread through the city. The panic grew so intense that even Nelson Mandela addressed the nation, urging calm and promising action. With pressure mounting, police turned to the public. That's when one name began to surface: Moses Sithole. Families told investigators that a man matching Sithole's description had approached their daughters as a stranger. He claimed he had job opportunities. He was polite. He was convincing. Some parents trusted him. He invited the young women for what he called a job interview. That was the last time they were ever seen. But men like this don't just appear out of nowhere. To understand how Moses Sithole became someone who could lie, manipulate, and kill without hesitation, you have to understand the world that shaped him. Moses Sithole was born on November 17, 1964, in a township called Vosloorus. This was apartheid South Africa. The state controlled black life through segregation, forced movement, policing, and violence. Many black leaders were jailed. Many families lived with constant pressure. Sithole was the fourth child born to Sophie and Simon Sithole, growing up in a crowded home where resources were thin and opportunity was even thinner. By accounts, he was a bright and curious child, but curiosity didn't open many doors in a place where schools were limited and futures were tightly controlled. Home was no refuge. In later interviews, Sithole would claim he was abused by his mother and his stepsister. He also said that while still a child, he was sexually abused by an older woman. Whether all of these claims can be independently verified or not, what is clear is that Sithole grew up in an environment marked by instability, trauma, and violence, long before he would become known for the violence he later carried out. When he was about 6 years old, his father died. As the family's sole provider, his death had immediate consequences. The family was evicted from their home. Sithole spent much of his childhood in youth homes and orphanages, moving from one institution to another under conditions he later described as harsh, where survival depended on toughness rather than care. At around 8, he ran away and tried to return to his mother. He crossed long distances, passing through shanty towns. When he arrived, however, there was no reunion. His mother sent him back to the orphanage. By about 11, he was moved again, this time to an orphanage in KwaZulu-Natal, an apartheid-designated homeland near the Indian Ocean. In his early teens, he ran away again. He hitchhiked roughly 300 miles back to Vosloorus to stay with his older brother, Patrick. Now on his own, he worked menial jobs. He trained as an amateur boxer. He built strength. He also developed a social presence that did not match the instability behind him. He was described as charming, with a disarming smile. He also had an interest in classical music. This is where the contrast begins. Public image and documented reality do not always exist in different bodies. Sometimes they exist in the same man, depending on who is looking. The first known attack that would later define his pattern happened in 1987. He targeted his girlfriend's sister, Patricia Kumalo. He tricked her into going with him to a dump site in Cleveland, Johannesburg, where he assaulted her. He left her tied up with clothing pulled over her face. Before leaving, he threatened her, telling her that if she went to the police, he would come back and kill her. Over the next few years, he attacked more women. One of them was Lindiwe Nkosi, also a girlfriend's sister. He threatened her, assaulted her, and choked her until she lost consciousness. Before leaving, he warned her not to go to the police. Like the others, she stayed silent. That silence wasn't just fear, it removed the last barrier. Each time no one reported him, the pattern became easier to repeat. With every attack that went unpunished, he learned that he could get away with it, and the violence became more routine. Then, in February 1989, he met a woman named Doris Swakamisa in Germiston. At the time, he was working as a store clerk, but he introduced himself as a successful businessman. He told her he could help her find a job and offered to escort her there. At a train station, he suggested taking a shortcut through the veld. Once they were far from other people, he pulled out a knife he had hidden inside a folded newspaper. He told her what he intended to do. He tied her hands using her underwear and assaulted her. Afterward, he left her bound in the veld, warning her that he would not kill her if she stayed silent. 3 months later, Swakamisa saw him again, this time inside a shop in downtown Johannesburg. She recognized him immediately and called the police in Cleveland, where the assault had taken place. Officers responded and arrested him. During transport with Swakamisa in the vehicle, he leaned toward her and said, "Bitch, I should have killed you." In court, Sithole claimed he was innocent, but the judge rejected his story. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. That sentence mattered for 2 reasons. First, it temporarily stopped his attacks. Second, it became something he carried with him, a grievance he would later use to justify what came next. In his own mind, he reframed the conviction as betrayal and injustice. He didn't see himself as a criminal, he saw himself as wronged. While in prison, Sithole got a taste of his own medicine with claims that he had his salad tossed by another inmate and was bullied. Despite this, he kept a calm, controlled exterior. To guards, he appeared to be a model inmate. What they didn't see was what was building underneath: resentment, anger, and a sense that the world owed him something, a rage that would follow him out of prison. He was released in November 1993. Within that timeline, the country had changed. South Africa was entering a new political era with public hope and a new movement. For someone like Sithole, that meant new opportunity. For the women he would target, it meant travel, job seeking, and exposure. After his release, Sithole moved in with a woman named Martha. Despite objections from her family, though they were not legally married, she was treated as his wife. He began working with her brother, fixing cars in the yard of her father's home. On the surface, it looked like a fresh start, a man trying to rebuild, a man leaving prison behind. Then the routine changed. He stopped working as a mechanic. Each morning, he left the house with a folded newspaper under his arm. He told people he was looking for work. He wasn't. He was preparing something else. This is where the murders begin. And once they begin, they do not slow down. In early July 1994, he met a 19-year-old woman named Maria Monema on the streets of Pretoria. He was neatly dressed and presentable. He introduced himself as Sylvester. He charmed not only Maria, but her family as well. He came across as stable, respectable, safe enough to be invited into their home and trusted around their daughter. That detail matters. It shows how he operated. He didn't only target women who were alone in public spaces. Sometimes he worked his way through families. He made people believe he belonged. The trust wasn't accidental. It was built. It was part of the method. Soon after, he lured Maria Monema to a remote area and strangled her. This was his first confirmed murder. When her body was discovered, there was a message written on her leg. "I am not fighting with you. We will stay here until you understand." After the first killing, the cycle accelerated. Sithole targeted unemployed Black women who were looking for work. That was not only because they were vulnerable. It was because job seeking requires trust in strangers. It requires showing up for meetings. It requires walking with someone who says, "I know a place." He built a system that used the city's routines. He would approach a woman in a public place, a taxi rank, a train station, a street near informal hiring areas. He would claim to have a high-paying job or a connection. He would not always push immediately. Often, he would make an appointment, then another appointment. He would sit with them in public, drink cold drinks, and talk through orderly steps. The meetings created an impression of legitimacy. Then he would set the final meeting in a crowded area where no one would notice a new conversation. He would flag down a minibus taxi like any commuter. He would ask the driver to drop them near an opening to the veld. That request was not suspicious in those neighborhoods. Footpaths across fields were common shortcuts. Once off the road and out of sight, he would lead the woman down a path and isolate her. Then the tone shifted. He would take out a knife, often carried in a folded newspaper. He would force her to undress. He would rape her. And then he would strangle her, often using her own underwear or other clothing. Investigators later described that he enjoyed the process before and during the crime as much as the crime itself. He found pleasure in convincing women to come with him. The act of persuasion proved something to him. It proved he could control emotions and decisions. It proved he could override hesitation. As the murders continued through July and into late 1994, police were pulled into a cycle of constant response. Investigators described being at one post-mortem when they were called to another scene. Sometimes, bodies were found in the same location days apart. That return to the same type of spot signaled confidence. In their words, it was arrogant. The media reported details about how the killer lured victims into the veld. That reporting had a secondary effect. It made the killer famous without a name. And according to investigators, notoriety can fuel people like this. Attention is not always received directly. It can be absorbed through newspapers, talk, and fear. Sithole reads the newspaper daily. He kept track of what people knew. He adjusted when women became more cautious. He adjusted when communities began warning each other. He adjusted when movement patterns changed. This is how a serial offender survives in plain sight, not by hiding completely, by watching the environment and adapting. By December 5th, 1994, his household looked ordinary from the outside. Martha gave birth to a baby girl. There was no public sign that the man leaving each morning was using the city as a hunting ground. The people close to him believed he was searching for work. Through early 1995, the killings continued. But something changed. The pace increased. At first, a body every 2 weeks, then once every week, then sometimes two in a single week. The killer had a method that worked, and he repeated it. He moved along transport routes. He targeted women caught in poverty and limited options. The system around him kept giving him access. By July 1995, investigators believed he had strangled at least 18 young women and dumped their bodies in fields outside Pretoria and Johannesburg. Police chased leads. They collected DNA, they followed tips, but the bodies kept appearing. The community felt it too. Women became more cautious about walking alone, especially at night. People warned each other. Safety became part of daily conversation. Those changes made it harder for the killer to approach victims the same way, so he adapted. Sithole created a new cover story. He invented a fictitious social service agency called Youth Against Human Abuse. The supposed mission was to reunite orphans and their families. He claimed he was looking for new employees and distributed phony job applications to women. In August 1995, he contacted a prominent photographer. He introduced himself and his organization. He said he needed to find a group home for 2 homeless children. The photographer helped him gain access to a children's home called Kids Haven. At Kids Haven, outside the center's laundry, he met Trifina Mahotsi. She was a single mother supporting an extended family. She lived with her mother and siblings and was the only one working. Sithole offered her a job with a significant bonus. She took an application immediately. She was hopeful because the offer sounded like stability for her family. The next day, he returned and told her the application had been accepted. He made an appointment to take her to the new job. They would meet at the train station and travel together. Trifina Mahotsi left to meet him and was never heard from again. By this point, the body count had reached 20 women. On the morning of August 15, 1995, he left his home in Adridgeville and took the train to Benoni on his way to meet Trifina. He promised her a job. Instead, he led her into a remote field and strangled her. Her family panicked when she did not return. Her sister went to the police, who published her photos in the newspapers. And 1 month later, on September 17, 1995, the reservist found 10 bodies near Boksburg prison. Trifina was among them. This is the moment when the case begins to change shape because one victim's disappearance created an administrative trail, a workplace, co-workers, a name remembered, a point of contact. For a long time, victims were found after the fact with little to connect them back to the last person they spoke to. Trifina's case produced witnesses who had seen the approach. Police canvassed Kids Haven. Through co-workers, they learned that on the day she disappeared, she had gone to meet a man named Moses Sithole. The problem was that Sithole is a common surname. A name alone was not enough. so investigators refined it. They found the photos of a specific Moses Sithole who had been arrested for rape in 1989. They passed the photo around. Trifina's co-workers identified him. For the first time, the serial killer had an identity. But knowing a name does not mean having custody. Investigators went to his home and discovered he had left his partner and child weeks before. Again, he was ahead of them by a step. Police put his picture on the front pages of newspapers across the country. The manhunt became national. Officers knew who they were looking for. They did not yet know where he was. And the person at the center of it was still moving. Once Moses Sithole's photograph was published nationwide, the case appeared, at least from the outside, to be resolved. Investigators now had a face, a name, and a prior conviction. Everything else seemed academic. In reality, the most difficult work was still ahead. In October 1995, police were on the trail, but something unusual happened. The suspect made contact with the media directly. On October 2nd, 1995, at around 6 p.m., the phone rang in the newsroom of the Johannesburg Star. Reporter Tamsin de Beer answered. The voice said, "I'm the man that everyone is looking for." He introduced himself as Joseph and claimed responsibility for the murders. De Beer later described the voice as charming and well-spoken with an accent. He spoke like someone trying to manage a relationship. Over the next days, the caller and the reporter had 3 lengthy conversations. The calls came from payphones. There was enough time to build a rhythm, a call, a response, another call. Each time the caller offered a rationale. He said he was killing out of revenge for being wrongly convicted of rape. He framed the murders as a message about injustice. That claim matters because it shows the narrative he wanted on record. He did not only want to evade capture, he wanted to shape how his actions were understood. He wanted to be seen as a person with a cause, not only a person with victims. The reporter considered the possibility that it was a hoax, but the caller provided details that made it unequivocally clear that he knew what he was doing. He described how some women fought and others gave up. He seemed interested in their responses. He spoke about women who were strong as men, and described struggling with them for even hours. De Beer contacted the police and shared transcripts. Authorities still were not fully certain she was speaking to the killer. The stakes were too high to assume, so the reporter tested him. On the next call, she asked him to prove it. The caller then gave the location of a body in the Eastern Rand area of Johannesburg that police had not found. He described the condition, a piece of metal covering the remains. The body was skeletal. De Beer passed the information to investigators. After several searches, they found the remains where he said they would be. He then gave another location, describing a fresh victim hanging half in a tree. Police found the body as described. It was the latest victim, a 31-year-old woman who had disappeared the day before. These discoveries changed the assessment. This was not a hoax. The caller had knowledge the police did not have. He was guiding them to bodies and proving control over the tempo of the investigation. Police are prepared for the next call. When the caller contacted De Beer again, investigators were waiting nearby. The call ended abruptly when the money ran out on the payphone. De Beer asked for a number to call back. The caller gave it. Investigators traced the number to a nearby train station. De Beer kept him on the line while officers rushed to the station. Then the phone went dead. The line ended. Sithole was now on the run. Police were close, but could not get to him. On October 13, 1995, his image was everywhere. That evening, De Beer's phone rang again. The caller shouted at her, angry, claiming he had trusted her. Around this time, Sithole tried to obtain a gun. He contacted his brother-in-law, Maxwell Macabane, seeking help. Macabane told him he would assist and arranged a meeting at the factory where he worked. Then Macabane called police. Undercover officer Francis Molovetsi was positioned at the gate, ready to arrest him. When Sithole arrived, he sensed the trap and fled. He ran into a dark alley with Molovetsi close behind. Then Sithole turned and swung an axe at the officer. Molovetsi fired several shots. Sithole was hit in the abdomen and leg. He did not die. Police rushed him to the hospital. In the hospital, when investigators tried to interrogate him, Sithole was uncooperative. Then the investigators made a strategic decision. Since the victims were women, they believed a female detective might be better able to draw him out. This approach worked. He became aroused while describing crimes and masturbated during the discussion. When asked why he raped and strangled 37 women, he said, "I did it to teach them a lesson." After recovering from his wounds, he was transferred to a prison near Pretoria to await trial. He received death threats from angry citizens. He was guarded by an elite police unit. Investigators said they wanted a fair trial and did not want anything to happen to him. This is another contrast. Public anger demanded punishment. The state insisted on procedure. While in prison, a fellow inmate, Derek Shulman, gained Sithole's trust and smuggled recording equipment inside. He recorded conversations in which Sithole described how he strangled his victims and how long it took. In those recordings, Sithole spoke openly about his hatred toward black women. By October 21st, 1996, Sithole was charged in the Pretoria High Court with 38 murders and 40 rapes. Investigators also stated there were likely more women raped and killed than those charges reflected, but evidence limits what can be prosecuted. More than 140 witnesses testified for the state. That number includes police, forensic experts, and civilians who saw Sithole approach women and claimed he was going to recruit them. Recruitment or the aftermath. It includes Esther Malong, the co-worker who remembered Trifina's name and identified the mugshot. Witnesses described fear in the courtroom. Some described Sithole laughing and shaking his head while they testified, attempting to intimidate them. DNA linked him to multiple crimes. The jailhouse confession recordings reinforced the pattern. The prosecution did not need a single dramatic moment. It had layers of corroboration. The death penalty had been abolished in post-apartheid South Africa, so the court used a different mechanism to ensure he would not be released. On December 5th, 1997, he was sentenced to 2,410 years in prison. The number is symbolic in one sense, but it functions as a procedural certainty: no parole, no chance of return. Sithole was shocked and believed he would be acquitted. For the victims' families, the sentence did not resolve the loss. People spoke about sisters and daughters who had left behind children and dependents. They spoke about families broken permanently. In communities where one income can support an extended household, a disappearance is not only grief, it is economic damage. From here, the story would be easy to end on a verdict. It would be easy to close on a sentence and a prison gate. But the documentary record does not end there, and neither does the harm. Because the system he operated in did not stop at violence in the veld. It continued in illness, stigma, and the uneven distribution of care. After conviction and sentencing, the story narrows in one sense. One man is locked behind high-security walls, sentenced to life without parole. His violence is physically contained, but in another sense, the story expands. The damage does not stop with him. It spreads outward into families, into communities, and into the systems that failed to protect the women he targeted. After his arrest, Moses Sithole was diagnosed with AIDS at a time when treatment options were extremely limited. Many of his victims had already been given a silent death sentence. Inside prison, Sithole received medical care and antiviral treatment. Outside, the consequences were harsher. His partner, Martha, and their daughter were also infected. They did not have the money or access to the same level of care. While Sithole lived behind bars with medical support, his family faced the disease with far fewer resources. In the end, the sentence did not just belong to one man. It belonged to everyone his actions touched.